So good morning, all of you. Yesterday, we have studied historical background of cane repertory, and in that lecture, we have seen two important aspects of this historical background. That how Dr. Kane got converted to homeopathy, and how the illness of his wife has affected him, and because of that illness, how he gets converted to study of homeopathy. Then he has joined the homeopathic medical college. Then he has become the professor of homeopathic repertory, and then he developed interest in the field of repertory. And when he came to the field of repertory, already in about century has been passed since the development of repertory. He has entered into the field of repertory in the last quarter of, or in the last few years of Bollywood era. Yesterday we have understood that he might have been in developed interest in the repertory in between the year 1885 to 1890. And during this year 1885, 1890 onwards, there are various events were simultaneously going on in the field of repertory. And because of all those historical scenarios in the field of repertory, Dr. Kent has decided that there is a need of a new repertory, and that new repertory will give answer. That new repertory should be formed in such a way that should be done in such a way that it will solve all the unrests which were existing, which were prevailing at that time. And accordingly, he has started his journey of preparing a new repertory. And in his journey, we have found that he has searched to the all existing repertory. He found certain drawbacks, and whatever repertories were existing at that time, he found the most suitable repertory to work upon in this Dr. Constantine Lippage repertory of characteristics, or Dr. Constantine Lippage repertory. And accordingly, he has started few editions of rubric, few editions of medicine in repertory. Then he came in contact with Dr. Lippe. Dr. Lippe had shown the desire that Edmund Lee and Dr. Kane should work conjointly to form a new repertory. And then later on, Dr. Lee became blind. The whole responsibility came on the shoulder of Dr. Kane. And then Dr. Kane has prepared a repertory for his own use in the practice. And it was not like that he has prepared the repertory and within few months he has published the repertory. He has kept that repertory, he has used that repertory in his own practice. And at that time, Dr. Kent was very much famous for his teachings of homeopathy, and accordingly he has also taken some initiatives in development of homeopathic association. So in America, he was a founder of one of the homeopathic societies. He was a member of American Homeopathic Society. Later on, he became the president of American Homeopathic Society. And because of his under his presidentship, There were so many meetings used to conduct, so many eminent personalities from homeopathy used to visit his clinic. And one of the visits to the clinic of Dr. Kane, there are few doctors like Dr. Thurston, Dr. Bigler. They have found that Dr. Kane has prepared a new repertory, and they were quite impressed by that repertory, and they have asked Dr. Kane to publish it. So Dr. Kent also, after its clinical verification, after a few years of using his own repertory, with some of his members of American Society, Dr. Kent has decided to publish this repertory. And because of insistence of his various members of American Society, he had decided to publish it. And now in this lecture, we will see how he has published the King's repertory, his magnum opus. So once his members like Dr. Kimball, Thurston, Bigler has asked him to publish. So at that time, there was one famous homeopathic publisher, and that famous homeopathic publishing company was Boric and Tackle. That was the name of publisher, and that Boric and Tackle, they have contacted to Dr. Boric and Tackle, and they have shown Dr. Kane's repertory. They have advised him to publish. But at that time, Boric and Tackle, though he was a famous publisher of homeopathic books, because of Second World War, he was going under certain financial crisis, and because of that financial crisis, he was not in a position to publish this repertory. And one more reason why Boric and Tackle further refused the publishing of Kane repertory, because this publisher has done a survey in the market that if a new repertory is published during this time, how many people are ready to buy it. So, as you know, the publishing house has to manage various financial aspects before publishing the book. At least the cost of the book, the publishing cost of the book should be collected by publishing the books. So similarly, they have also conducted the survey, and they have found that very less number of homeopathic physicians were interested. So because of these two reasons, because of their poor financial condition and because of the market survey, they have refused to publish this new repertory. Then later on, the few of the members of American Homeopathic Society, like Dr. Kimball, Dr. Thurston, and Dr. Bigler, they had a meeting with Dr. Boric of Dr. Boric and Taffel, and somehow they have him, convinced the publishing house to publish this new repertory by saying that this repertory would be very much useful. But at that time, the cost of publishing the whole repertory in a single attempt was very much, and it was near about $3,000, and Dr. Bori did not afford, did not want to gamble with doing so such a huge amount of money. So they have found a midway. So Dr. Boric and Taffel were not ready to publish it. Dr. Kimball Thirst and Dr. Bigler were convincing him to publish this repertory. But somehow this meeting was not successful, and they have found a midway. instead of publishing this repertory in a single volume at a single time, they have proposed that this repertory should be published in a section by section. That means all the repertory will not be published as, as a whole volume of a single repertory, but they will publish it by chapter by chapter. They will publish this repertory in the series. So part one of this repertory, part two of the repertory, and accordingly they had a meeting that they will publish this repertory, and accordingly they have started publishing this Keynes repertory one by one in one of their journals. And after the first section was published was mind section, and second section, that is second chapter, was published in the head chapter. And after taking review, or after these two chapters were published, the physicians who have subscribed to this repertory were not at all satisfied. They were much disappointed by these two sections of the repertory, and many of them have refused to contribute further, and they want, and many of them have wanted to cancel their subscription. So the first attempt of publishing the repertory was with was cancelled, and then whatever efforts were taken by Dr. Borik, and Bigler, all those efforts have seen the disappointment. All these efforts were not properly or not welcomed by the homeopathic physician at that time. But in spite of that hurdle, in spite of that obstacle, Dr. Kent slowly made up his mind, and he has, in spite of all these difficulties, he has published his repertory part by part. And during this, regarding this time period of difficulties, Dr. Kane writes, well, the things went on from bad to better, not to worse. So this is a sentence is full of sarcasm. Bad to better and not to worse. That means actually the circumstances were becoming more and more difficult, and in spite of all those difficulties, in spite of all those odd situations, all the hard work is done by Dr. Kent in publishing this repertory. There were a lot of sufferings to Dr. Kent during the publication of this first edition. And finally, with lot of much sufferings, lot of much hurdles, the first edition of Keynes repertory was published in the year 1897. Now, a point to remember is that this aspect, how the first edition of repertory was published, why Borik and Tafel has refused, and how it has been published section by section. Many examiners, oral examiners, will try to assist you regarding this story of the publishing of the first edition of Keynes repertory, and they will be emphasizing that you must know this all hardships which are done by our ancestors, because some of them have become blind, some of them have become ill, and but in spite of all those, some of them have become financially poor, but in spite of them, for the betterment of the next generation, they have continued their work with the same enthusiasm and with the same zeal, and finally they have come to this edition, first edition of Keynes repertory. If you search on the internet archives, is a website where the homeopathic, most of the homeopathic books, they have scanned, and you can visualize this first edition of Kent repertory in on that website, Internet Archives. I have just today morning I have seen that first edition. So that first edition was published in the year 1897, and after a few years, most of the homeopathic physicians are convinced that this is a better repertory. Now imagine a situation where in today's century, where just all are admiring the work of Dr. Kent with respect to the mental symptoms. But imagine a situation after that two editions, two sections were published, that is Mind and Head. The most important section of Dr. Kent's work was published, and that had seen the less response. That means you should imagine how much at that time there was a dominance of bone emotions philosophy. So I have also mentioned that one of the academic objectives of this learning historical background of Kent repertory is to understand the various events occurring during that time. So from this, it is very clear that in spite of all these things, all these difficulties, in spite of a publishing of new repertory, immediately it did not get a bright response from homeopathic physicians, and there were such a less response from homeopathic physician, and which has also disappointed stalwart like Dr. James Tyler Kane, and this disappointment was seen with only respect to the, especially with respect to the mind chapter of Kane repertory. Imagine a situation. This speaks about the dominance of bone emotions philosophy. It speaks about the popularity of bone emotions repertory at that time. And after this first edition was published, slowly, this repertory was well accepted by most of the homeopathic physicians. And there was a demand for the further editions of this repertory. Then we'll see what are the various editions of this Kent repertory. And this part, various editions of Kent repertory, is very much useful. Now, the second edition was published. The history did not know the exact year in which it is published, exact publisher, and who has assisted it. And whatever history or whatever literature you have available, it is directly available to the third edition of Kent repertory. But there was a second edition of Kent repertory was also there, and in that second edition of Kent repertory, the history does not recognizes the exact year, exact publisher, and exact assistance. Then the third edition. Now, this sixth edition of Kent repertory we have also seen in the Kentian era of Kent repertory. But at that time, we have not learned that who were the publishers and who were the physicians, who were the followers of Dr. Kent, who have helped in publishing these various editions. So the third edition was actually ready by the year 1960 to publish. But during that year, unfortunately, Dr. Kane's death occurred, and that publishing of the third edition was not in the same year. Then, after the death of Dr. Kane, after 8 years, it was published by American publisher Earhart and Carl. And the main contribution of publishing of the third edition goes to Dr. Gladwin and Dr. J.S. Fogg. Then who were these two persons? Now these two persons were mainly the members of American Homeopathic Society, and because of their insistence, the third edition was published. And regarding this third edition, what Kent himself says that the third edition completes my life work. According to Dr. Kent, the third edition was the most complete edition which he has published so far. Remember this word. According to Dr. Kent, the third edition was the most complete and most accurate repertory published by Dr. Kent. Now there are some links to this third edition that we will see in the next meeting. But remember, the third edition is the most important edition in the history of Kent's repertory. Then this third edition was published, and slowly, after years together, Dr. Kent's philosophical background, Dr. Kent's innovative ideas of plan and construction were some technical issues again continued. That the slowly after the publishing of third edition of Kent repertory, the ideas were properly accepted, ideas were well responded by the physician, and after publishing of third edition of Kent repertory, Kent, Kent's philosophy, Kent's various innovative ideas become very popular, and then there was a demand for the fourth edition of Kent repertory. Now, in this demand, Edhard and Karl wanted to publish the fourth edition of Kent repertory, and in that fourth edition of Kent repertory, these three persons, Dr. S.E. Gladwin, Dr. W. Sherwood, and Dr. Perry Smith, were immensely helped to publish the fourth edition. This Dr. F.E. Gladwin, Dr. Perry Smith, where Dr. F.E. Gladwin is a student of Dr. Kent, and Dr. Perry Smith is a student of Dr. F.E. Gladwin. And this Dr. F.E. Gladwin, Dr. W. Sherwood were the two important members of that American Society. So, with the help of these eminent personalities, the fourth edition was published. Then the fifth edition was published in the year 1945, and that year 1945, the fifth edition was published then by the same American publisher, Edhard and Karl. Again, Dr. Gladwin, Dr. Clara Louise Kent, and Dr. Perry Smith were again the eminent personalities who has helped Dr. who has helped Clara Louise Kent in publishing the fifth edition of Kent's repertory. Now, few words about Dr. Clara Louise Kent. Now, we all know that Dr. Clara Louise Kent was wife of Dr. Kent, and in the history we have also seen that Clara Louise Kent was also sick. So actually, there are three wives of Dr. James Tyler Kent. First wife is Dr. Elaine, which has expired at the age of 19 years. Second wife was Lucy, and that Lucy has suffered from nervousness, weakness, and insomnia. And because of his treatment, he has converted into homeopathy. And Dr. Clara Louise Taube, it was the original name of Dr. Kent's third wife, and this Dr. Clara Louise Taube, Tobey, was mainly this Clara Louise Taube was basically an allopathic physician, and this allopathic physician was basically taking treatment from various homeopathic physicians, and he, he was unsuccessfully treated by other homeopathic physicians, and finally he was successfully treated by a homeopathic physician, and accordingly he became follower of Dr. James Tyler Kent, and later on Dr. James Tyler Kent got married to Clara Louise Kent, and further editions of this Dr. Kent's repertory were published mainly by the important contribution by Dr. Clara Louise Kent, and student of indirect student of Dr. James Tyler Kent, that is Dr. Perry Smith. And accordingly, everything was published about the fifth edition, about and the sixth edition was published in the year 1957 in Hart and Carr. It was just a reprint edition of the fifth American edition. So remember, and this is the main important